Hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Leanne Elliott. I'm a Reiki energy healer, intuitive medium, and the founder of Midlife Alchemy, a community platform for midlife women to come inside, take a deep breath, rest our bones, and walk with each other through this transformative season that is the midlife journey. I'm not just an energy healer, I'm also a recovering overachiever, a recovering people pleaser, a recovering perfectionist, and a recovering woman who spent decades doing everything right. And still, I arrived at my 40s feeling like something had terribly and silently gone wrong. I started my midlife journey a little bumpy. I'd already been a wedding planner for over 2 decades, and I had two young children coming into school age, and I had big plans for my business. I was going to scale, get better clients, and my hope was that I was going to finally get the recognition that I'd been craving for so long. But just after my 42nd birthday, I learned that I was unexpectedly pregnant with my third child. And so a season that started out with a lot of big plans ended with me waddling around 8 months pregnant as a 43-year-old midlife woman. By the time my toddler weaned, I was almost 45. And so my baby making and breastfeeding hormones crashed into what is the hormone free fall of perimenopause. I was already suffering from undiagnosed postpartum depression. I had a C-section scar that wouldn't heal. And after revisiting those early baby years, I felt deeply isolated from my older children and the moms that I'd been parenting with that had since gone back to work, and also from my career that I loved so much. And so instead of pausing and recalibrating, I did what any overachieving mom of three young children would do, and I booked 28 weddings that next event season. I thought for sure that whatever I was missing, whatever I felt was slipping away, the edge that I thought I was losing would find me on the other side of a record-breaking event season. But all that was there was deep burnout and a deeper sense of feeling lost, and most days not even really sure which end was up. I was spinning, I was exhausted, and I did not know what to do next. I thought maybe I'd just aged out of my industry, that the young girls coming up could do my job better than I did. And so I made the choice to close my business. And I pivoted to a local winery to help them rebuild their events program. It gave me a real bump in my confidence. It really made me feel like the decades of experience and expertise that I'd gathered were being put to good use. But even with all of that extra motivation that came from that new position, I could not shake that something was changing in me. And that's when March of 2020 sent us all home. And the pandemic did for me what nothing before it could do, and that is force me to slow down and get quiet. In those first couple of weeks and months, I had a massive ego death. All of the systems I'd built to prove my worthiness and my success were gone. All of the hustle and busyness that I'd always taken on in order to outrun my own life was gone. And I was left to just look at my life for what it was. I was in the quiet of really evaluating what had happened to me in all of those years and decades of overgiving, overachieving, and self-abandonment. I had chronic body aches. I had extremely painful TMJ. I had cystic acne, IBS. I couldn't get a good night's sleep. I was constantly skating along the edge of a panic attack. And I thought surely I could just outrun it. But in those quiet months, I realized that I needed a real foundational recalibration to my life. And that's when something else started to happen. I began to remember that I have a body from the shoulders down. Up until that point, I had really only operated from the neck up. I was always in my head, strategizing, looking ahead, setting goals, thinking about next week, next month, next year. I was never really in the present moment. But in the absence of a real schedule during that lockdown, I began to start my day with a simple yoga routine. I began to learn to meditate, and I tried out breath work. I walked around my block with podcasts and audiobooks, and I sat on my patio just to watch the shadows move across my lawn. I remembered what it was like to be present with my children, to laugh and create and bake and be in the moment. And so when the pandemic lifted, I didn't want to go back to work. I did not want the same things I had always wanted. I didn't really care about the recognition and the accolades and the paycheck anymore, because what had happened in those quiet months is that I had begun to heal. And I began to actually feel good in my body for the first time in decades. I didn't want to let that feeling go. I wanted to capture what it was like to be happy and feel good every single day, like I had during those quiet months. But in the interest of getting back to work, I re-upped my game and my motivation and my competitiveness, and I went back to work. And I tried to pretend that those long months of healing didn't happen. I pretended like I hadn't changed, that I hadn't shifted, and that I wasn't in the midst of a massive shift myself. At the time, I didn't know what perimenopause was. I thought menopause was something in my future, someday, later in my 50s, and that it would maybe somehow announce itself with some kind of defining symptom that said, now I'm in menopause. I didn't realize that from my very early 40s, I had actually been showing signs of being in perimenopause. Not knowing that's what it was, thought that something was wrong with me. I thought that I was glitching. I thought that I was flawed. And so while I was busy trying to get back to business as usual, my body had other plans. That version of me no longer existed. And my body was speaking really loudly to me. I was going through long bouts of paralysis in my neck, shoulders, and arms. I had debilitating lower back pain that made it hard to stand up or walk without deep and excruciating pain. And I realized that my body was not going to let up until I listened to it. And so I did one day. I stopped pretending that things hadn't changed. And on a December morning in 2021, just a few months after my 50th birthday, I walked into my boss's office and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And he was shocked and I was terrified. And he said, okay, well, if you're not going to do this, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but it isn't going to be this. And with those words, something landed in me. A truth was unlocked in me. I knew that something had shifted and I had gone past the point of being able to turn back and do pretty much anything the way I had done it before. I had this sense that something deeper and bigger was moving me. I knew that whatever was waiting for me in my future, in a new version of myself, would not be able to find me unless I began to walk towards it first. And so that's what I did. What came after that was not another job. It was a complete free fall into the unknown. I collapsed into bed for the better part of 2 months because I did not need a weekend off. I did not need a vacation. I needed a complete recalibration. I needed to repair. And when I woke up from that long nap, I realized that something had transpired for me that was calling me into a bigger question about my life. The question was not, what job am I going to get next month? The question was, what am I here to do? What is my purpose? What is it that I want from my life? How do I want to live and how do I want to feel? And perhaps the most burning question when I realized I was actually going through perimenopause and menopause was, could I go through midlife without it being a crisis? Could midlife and menopause be an expansion, a becoming, an awakening? Could it be a partnership with myself where I discover something new every day, or at least more frequently than I had before? Could I actually find a joy and an excitement for life? Does midlife have to be an aging to become an older person that just simply is not vital and then eventually dies? Or is there something waiting for me in this next chapter? And could it be better than I could ever imagine? I went deep on these questions. I started going to women's retreats and sat in healing circles. I started a whole podcast so that I could talk to other women about the aging process in midlife and menopause. I spent long days wandering through the mountains around my house. I spent days on end in silence, unraveling, unlearning, deprogramming. As the months turned into years, I began to explore other options for careers, things that had never been on my radar before. And in the process, I became a certified Reiki practitioner. I walked the 10 rites of the Munaki shamanic lineage. I learned that I have clairvoyant abilities. And all along this journey, this adventure that I was on, I kept asking myself, could this be the most exciting and transformative and expansive time of my life? And here's what I came away with as a knowing, not just thinking, not just assuming, but knowing that women go through midlife and menopause not as an unraveling, but as a refinement. It is not a malfunction of our bodies. It is a reckoning. We reach this midlife and the veil falls, and we see our life for what it is for the first time. We can see what it is that we've done that has caused our own self-abandonment and our own pain. We can see the ways that we lost the pulse on our own life. Maybe we lost the dream. Maybe we lost our own name for seasons even. And this is the time when we arrive to midlife and our bodies, our minds, our souls, our spirits say, enough. It is time for reconciliation. It is time for recalibration. And so I began to wonder, why is it that we arrive to midlife and it does feel like a crisis? And I realized that it only feels like a crisis if we believe that we have to be stuck in the unraveling. If we were to rewire the way we think about midlife and menopause to be conspiring in our favor, an invitation for transformation, something that arrives by perfect and sacred design. So I began to think about our particular generation of midlife women. We are really uniquely positioned. We are the first generation of women that is as resourced and liberated as any generation that has ever come before us. And of course, there's still work to do. If you go back and trace women's liberation and our fight for equality and freedom, you will go back to the beginning of recorded history. But if we go back just a couple of generations to our grandmothers and mothers, we find that the liberation movement of the 60s and 70s was really about wanting to be seen, wanting to be acknowledged as existing in the world. And that anger, that public display of "you will see me" was right on time. In the 70s and 80s in particular, what that generation of women was fighting for was a seat at the table. But what happened when they found a seat at the table to be seen as equal and just as competent as their male counterparts? They found that after generations of women being home, raising children, and keeping the house, the work environments that they found themselves suddenly operating in were not designed for them. This is the seat at the table we have also inherited. And what it is it's an environment that is built for masculine sensibility and masculine rhythm. Men are more aligned with a sun cycle. They wake in the morning, they are productive all day, they rest in the evening, and they do it all again tomorrow. They are much more capable of maintaining a productivity and a more linear way of seeing a workday. Women, on the other hand, are in the rhythm of the moon cycle. Our hormonal renewal takes an entire month. And each of those weeks requires and asks something different of us. We are not designed to rinse and repeat every day. We are designed for periods of rest, for creativity, for service and offering, and then to rest again and receive. This is the cadence where we feel most alive, most healthy, most vital. But our work environments hardly deliver this, even when we have a baby, even when we're menstruating, even when we're ill. It's not that women can't operate in this environment. We actually do it quite well. It's just that we're not meant to sustain ourselves here. So when we do arrive to midlife after decades of trying to push and hustle and be unrelenting, goal-oriented, determined, maybe even aggressive and really go-getting our goals, we start to fall apart in midlife because it is not the pace that honors our divine design. So the question is, when we do arrive to midlife, are we designed just to deteriorate and age and become inconsequential to our society and our community? Or is there something bigger happening here? Did you know that there are only two mammals on the entire planet Earth that live well past childbearing years? That's whales and humans. And scientists believe that we live well into old age without being able to bear children for a bigger purpose, not to become unvital and sort of wither out. It is so that we become the wisdom keepers, so that we become the sage elders that know a thing or two. We have decades of experience. We have been through it. We have seen it. And we have wisdom. And that wisdom is needed and necessary to help guide the generations that are coming up. We've mostly lost the pulse on this purpose for women of older age. And yet we are designed uniquely for this purpose. So the question is, could that be you? Are you coming into the season of being a wisdom keeper? When I realized that this is likely what was happening for me, I stopped wondering what it was like to push off aging. And I started to wonder what it was like to work with this season, to step into what it was trying to do for me, not seeing it as a season of trying to conspire against me. But when I looked around to see what was available to me, I was surprised to find out that there was precious little I could do to kind of help guide myself through this process. Yes, I could get hormone replacement therapy. I could get injections or a facelift. I could go to a nutritionist or get therapy. But while all of those are really important for helping to manage and even help bolster us during this really incredible time of disorientation, none of it really addresses what is happening to us metaphysically and spiritually during this season. There's something bigger happening here. And so what would happen if instead of turning away from it and trying to outrun it, we turned into it and started working with it as a collaboration for our betterment and our ultimate bigger purpose? So when I started to imagine that I was going to work with this season, I identified what I now call the 6 sacred markers of midlife. These are the 6 symptoms of menopause and the midlife season that really have the most notorious reputation. They're the ones we try and apologize for. They're the ones that get dismissed in the doctor's office. And they're the ones that we tend to feel like are a flaw of our physical design rather than a perfect design for our transformation. What I don't want to do is discount that these symptoms do bring real and significant suffering sometimes. What is happening to us physically is very real. But what I'm asking you to do in these next few minutes is to imagine that maybe there is something else going on here and that these symptoms are bringing with it a deeper and more beautiful intention for your evolution. Let's start with the first and most notorious, which is hot flashes. Miserable, overwhelming, and sometimes unrelenting. What we're led to believe is that our hormones are out of control and we have no power here. But what if the hot flashes that come up are sacred refinement? What if this is the fire of transformation? What if the heat that comes up in our bodies is burning away what cannot come with us? What if the next time you get a hot flash, you ask, what is it I'm leaving behind? What is it I no longer need? Yes, yes, burn that away too. The second marker is rage and intolerance. What we're told is that we are unpredictable and out of control, that we are angry. But what if rage and intolerance was sacred boundaries? What if this was our body saying, no more? I won't participate in that. I won't do that. I don't have to show up for that anymore. What if this rage and intolerance was the courage and the energy needed in order to say no in a way that truly refines your life and allows for what comes in next is a sacred yes of the things that you want more of, the things you want to fill your life with, the things that you want to build your future with. The third marker is brain fog or forgetfulness. We're told that we're losing our edge, that our brain is no longer working, or worse, there might actually be something wrong with it. But what if something else is happening here? Instead of it being your brain glitching, it is your brain shedding what no longer needs to be remembered. You've spent your whole life remembering schedules, to-do lists, tasks, names, numbers. You have been on to keep all of these details organized and in line as much as possible. And now it's time for the brain to shed those unnecessary pieces of information in order to make room for a sacred remembering. This is about returning to who you are at your essence and core. What are your values? What are your passions? What do you love about your life? And what do you love most about you in your life? This is a remembering of who you want to become in your future version of yourself. And so working with this forgetfulness is actually working with this shedding. And working with the shedding makes room for the right kind of remembering. The fourth marker is sleeplessness. Those 3 a.m.s night after night where you just can't get back to sleep, laying there hot and frustrated and wishing you could just get a full night's sleep like you used to. But these hours of awakening can actually be thought of as sacred clarity. In the mystical Sikh tradition, these hours were considered the most sacred in the 24-hour cycle. They were the liminal space between asleep and awake. When the logical brain isn't fully online, you're able to hear your higher self, your future self, and what they want from you. And so if we were to lay down the frustration and maybe pick up a notebook or a journal and listen to what is being spoken and whispered in the dark of those hours, this is the time to hear maybe that it's your turn to write a book, your turn to start a podcast, your turn to change careers. In these sacred and quiet hours, we are able to hear in a way that we're not able to hear normally when the sun is up. And it is during this time that so much can be answered if we're willing to listen. The fifth marker is disengagement or apathy. This is when our body is saying, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go where we've always gone. I don't want to do what we've always done. I'd rather be home, go to bed at 8, stay in on Saturday night. This can be a really unsettling thing to feel if you're an extrovert who's used to being the life of the party or the host. It can also be unsettling for us introverts who is used to seeing our identity through how we relate to those in our social circles and community. But what if what is happening in this desire to retreat is an inner wintering? What if this is a sacred rest? What if we're welcoming the death, the cold, the dormancy, and the dark for this period of time to allow things to die away, to allow ourselves to slough, to rest, to sleep, so that we can choose what seeds we are planting, what seeds we are allowing to germinate, and what we are tending to in our own gardens that we would like to see bloom in the spring. It can feel like we're going to retreat into solitude forever, but on the other side of this transformation, we do wake up and we do want to tend the bloom of what is next. The sixth sacred marker is grief or emotional waves. What we are told is that we're too sensitive, that we're too reactive. But what if what is happening with grief or emotion is a sacred release? This is the waters that cleanse and clear. Grief and mourning is the storm that stirs up the bottom of the lake and allows us to see what needs to be processed, grieved, let go, and healed. Grief is a beautiful partner in making room for a future full of joy and excitement and fulfillment and purpose. Grief is a beautiful tool that helps us in this middle transformation to become a clear and more focused version of ourselves for the life that we want to create. And so these markers are not an indication of our failing. They are not an indication that our body is betraying us. This is the process of a perfectly designed and right on time, beautiful transformation that especially midlife women are called into in order to be refined, in order to be called forward as the wisdom keepers of our families and our social circles. This is an incredible time to be aware and alert of what is happening to you so that you can work with this season. And so that it does not remain a crisis because you are trying to outrun it, but it becomes an invitation for transformation and evolution into this next chapter of your life. There are so many years left to live. And wouldn't it be wonderful if those were spent thriving and stepping fully into your purpose? The affirmations I would like to leave you with today is that you are not broken, you are being refined. Your body is not betraying you. It is refining and refocusing to prepare you for a new purpose. And vitality and joy increase enormously when we learn how to work with this season instead of trying to outrun it. If something spoke to you today, just know that you do not have to walk this path alone. You are in the refiner's fire, and what is waiting on the other side is the most powerful, luminous, on-purpose version of you. This is exactly what I teach in the Midlife Alchemy 5 Gateways program. This is a community platform that invites women to come inside where we can walk together through this incredible midlife journey. Inside this program, we walk through the 5 gateways of transformation. And in there, we get to ask ourselves individually and together, what does this season mean for me? What am I letting go of? What am I reclaiming? What am I grieving? And what am I dreaming for myself in this new future ahead of me? There are so many years left to live, and together we get to walk through the fog and the fire into vitality and purpose. Before you leave today, I'd like to offer you a gift. I've developed a free quiz that helps identify which gateway might be calling to you most right now. Inside, you will get your own personalized gateway profile. You'll get a description of what that gateway might mean for you and an action step that can stop the spin and the sense of feeling lost and help restore some direction and intention for where you would like to go next. I hope this quiz is as helpful to you as it has been for me. The questions inside have been the questions I've asked myself. And on the other side, they will help you identify where you land in this incredible season of transformation. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an honor to be with you, and I hope I'll see you on the inside.